Bang! Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey. I want to apologize if you guys tuned in to check out John Tomasoni the other day. We had a connection issue, but we got John rescheduled for next week, and we're going to make that right. What else did I have? I wanted to send a shout out to Maurice Stringer for coming on. If you guys checked out that interview, thanks for checking that one out. That was another good one. And we got a great guest for you tonight. Again, this is a guy I've been trying to get after for a little while here. I found him on LinkedIn, and I like the words that he says. So we finally made the connection here tonight. And without further ado, let's get him out. We got the owner of Creswell Organics in Oregon. It's Trent Hancock. Trent.
How's it going?
Hey, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks. It's kind of breaking up a little bit on my side. I don't know if that's my connection or. Well,
let's find out. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can hear you. It was a little choppy, but it looks like your video feed's a little choppy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get bad service out here, so sorry about that.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind a little choppy video, I don't mind. The audio sounds good.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, before we get into anything serious, will you give us a 5-minute life story, please?
I'm sorry, a 5-minute what?
Oh boy, it's a little segment I call 5-minute life story.
Sorry about that, man. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, you can't hear me, huh? How about now?
Sorry about that, man.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. If the connection sucks a lot, we'll cancel it and we'll figure out something else. But let's give it a few minutes. We'll see how it goes. Yeah,
actually, let's start over real quick because I'm gonna cut off my Wi-Fi and I think I got to turn off my video for a second.
Okay.
Is that okay?
I don't know how to start over, but you can go ahead and do it. I got a minute.
Okay.
No rush, man. Hey.
There is. Is that better?
Hey, that does sound a little better. Let's try this. Let me see if you can hear this. Will you give us a 5-minute life story, Trent?
There, I think that's better. It's not being as choppy. It looks like so.
Cool. Can you hear me? Do you have audio?
Yeah. Now it's coming in clear. Now I think it was my Wi-Fi or something.
Beautiful. Hit us with a 5-minute life story if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to cannabis, that aspect, I started selling cannabis in 1995. I was living in Portland, growing up in Portland, and became a grower in 98. I was 17 and just basically been doing it ever since. I mean, I got into medical early in Montana. It was actually the first state to have unlimited medical cards and you could sell to your cards. So the very first businesses were in Montana that were like large indoor grows prior to Colorado. And then they built grows far bigger than ours. But back then, basically what they did is took the West Coast laws and they made some adjustments, the activists that passed the initiative in 2004. And so, yeah, that was my first time getting involved in fairly good sized grows and realized really quick that bugs and mold spread like wildfire. The bigger the grow, the harder it is to control. And that's kind of how I got into the pesticide argument because we wrote the first article from a commercial grower saying that there needed to be testing in medical cannabis. I was witnessing people spray all the way up until cut down. And back then it was like the Wild West. There was no testing at all. It was
don't jump too far ahead, Trent. We're going to get there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just giving you a breakdown of, how I got into the conversation.
You skipped some of your life, like the beginning of it.
Yeah.
You jumped right into the cannabis. What did you do before that? Are you from Oregon originally?
Yeah, I mean, I basically grew up between here and Montana. My dad was a fireman in Bozeman, Montana for about 20 years. And my mom was in Portland, so I kind of went back and forth as a kid and basically grew up in Portland ever since I was 10.
You like it out there?
Oh, yeah. It's always had great cannabis and, it's just – but, yeah, it's been a great place growing up and a good place to raise your kids too.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounded. How many? You say you got like 5 kids or something?
Yeah. I got 5 of them, and they keep you busy.
Yeah, and so is this your family business, cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, basically,
That's
I
how you
was
feed your.
raising my daughter on my own when I first started legally in medical, because I didn't want to be in the underground scene, I guess you could say, anymore, because I was raising my daughter by myself. So that's how I got into medical cannabis and consulted a lot of growers, and yeah, that's kind of how I got my start.
Have you ever gotten any trouble with the police?
Yeah, I got a felony for cannabis. The incident happened in 2004. I was in Portland, and I was going down to Montana and visiting friends, since I had some friends from when I was first, growing up there when I was younger, and found out, the prices and what was going on with medical. Just kind of had me stay there for a while, since I could help people with their businesses. And since I was a felon for cannabis, I got a felony in Montana, and I was convicted in 2005. But it was, a long time ago. I think let's see, 19 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost 2 decades there.
Yeah, and it's still a headache. You hear a lot of people saying that expungements are happening all over the place, but there's a lot of us that they won't expunge it for some reason.
Any idea why?
Well, I got my felony in Montana, so that's a big part of it. It's still pretty conservative out there, and it was only for 2 ounces too. So the only time I've ever been in trouble in my life was for 2 ounces of bud. And technically, right now, that's legal there, but I had it separated in different bags, and so I think that's the reason why they haven't removed it yet. But I'm gonna keep trying. I'll try to get it figured out.
Yeah, it seemed like they were only wanting to really expunge some of the lower level like possession charges, but then if there's any like sales, they're like, oh fuck no. It's like, why? You guys are selling weed now?
Yeah. I mean, that's really, like, everybody was so excited about all the federal expungements for misdemeanors, and there's not very many people that got a misdemeanor that's federal. I mean, unless you were in a state park or something like that. If you're in DC or something, maybe, but I didn't know anybody that helped or got anything off their records.
I don't think it did help anybody.
No, not even a single person got let out of jail from it. Not even a single person. And you see all these people celebrating it, and it's like, man, I know people that literally went to prison for selling a half ounce, and some of those people are still in jail to this day, and people are just like celebrating that. I don't know what you would call it, but
legalization.
Yeah.
So I want to, before we get into any of the real juicy stuff, I wanted to ask you about your company, Creswell Organics.
Yeah, we're just a small farm right now. We're a micro tier 2. We were originally a tier 2 because we have a 36-acre property, and we've been just running it as a small grow right now because of the wholesale prices in Oregon. And unless you're vertically integrated, you really don't want to have a lot of product. But I think the best companies right now in Oregon are they have their own dispensaries. They're selling from their production all the way to the consumer, and so that's kind of our goal right now, is to get vertically integrated and potentially gear our grow up.
Are you allowed to sell direct to consumer?
No, and that's the biggest problem. Is like there's over 2 grows for every dispensary in the state. So we have like 1,400 grows, and there's only 4 million people in our whole state. And so a lot of big money came in, and they own the dispensaries. So they were vertically integrated and pushing their own product. And, so it's all about test scores. It's not about, like in the old days, like you had to show people bud and show them it was the real, like, I don't know, I can't explain it, but it was just different. Like now everything goes off of test scores. And that's another reason why I got into the testing topic, because people are getting ridiculously high scores that aren't even, in my opinion, possible. And I was having to, like, I'd go in to sell product to a dispensary, and they'd say, oh, if it's not above 30%, we can't buy it. And I'm like, how rare a 30% score really is, like, with real test results. It's gotten pretty ridiculous.
So a lot of the dispensaries you're saying are controlled by these MSOs and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say all of them, there's a lot of MSOs. A lot of them are leaving the state right now, but some of them had 20 or 30 licenses, because the licenses limit you to 10,000 square feet of canopy indoor. And the loophole in it is you can have as many licenses as you want. So as long as
So
you got different addresses.
The largest tier you can grow indoor is 10,000, but unlimited licensing.
Yeah. So some of the big entities own like 20 farms and they all got different names, so you really don't know who's who the way it works, because somebody can present themselves as a small business, but have very big money behind them.
Sure. We got a question here. This is from Anna Schwab. Yeah, Anna, we are recording this. It'll be up on my YouTube and everything, and Facebook later on. So sorry to interrupt there. I like her. Dr. Anna. And I also was curious if you I wanted to ask you about your kind of cultivation methods, right? Because you have a licensed grow. And then I wanted to sort of ask you about the state regulatory framework before I forget about that.
Yeah, my growing methods is, I grow indoor. Like out here, outdoor is really hard to sell. I have an outdoor facility on our property, but we haven't used it. Our original plan was to use it for extracts and things like that. But because of the outdoor market crash in Oregon, we don't use it. But so we just have a small indoor facility. We use rapid air exchange instead of sealed rooms. In my opinion, that's the big difference that can prevent spraying. And most people are sealing their rooms up, and that's a whole topic in itself. But
yeah,
in my opinion,
could you explain that a little? Rapid air exchange?
Yeah, like we exchange air at high speeds and control the temperature algorithms to prevent bugs and mold. So basically, we simulate high altitude, and that prevents the bug from being able to reproduce. My dad was a Navy Seabee in the military, and he had some good low voltage controls. So he was a real straight edge fireman. So when I was in the underground back when I was younger, we didn't talk at all, basically. And then when I started consulting grows legally and building these big grows, he was like, well, if you put a damper over here and you do this and that, next thing you know, we're developing technology together. So.
Wow. Isn't that weird how that came back around?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's cool too. And I think it was a big start because he was more interested in vegetable production, and the indoor growers were way ahead of vegetable producers, because back when our pounds were 4,000, 5,000 a pound for indoor out here in the Northwest, you could have a really shitty grow style and you're still going to make money even on a little grow. And so we were toying with technologies that you can't get tomatoes, you can't get 4,000 a pound for them. So they were never dealing with artificial lighting or air control rooms and sealed rooms and all this stuff. That all came from basically the underground days. Sealed rooms, for example, that came from hiding your grow, not for quality. I don't know if you want to get all into the growing techniques, but
yes, dude, that's what I got you in here for.
Yeah, it sounds real scientific, so a lot of growers jumped on the sealed room bandwagon. But the thing is when you look at the history of sealed rooms, it actually came from stealth, not science, because we couldn't exhaust our air. If we're in Portland, for example, with an illegal grow back in the 90s, if you exhausted your air, you're going to get arrested, or someone's going to walk by and know it's in there, and you're going to get robbed. And so at that time period, we were sealing our rooms and using CO2. And the horticulture equipment companies could not acknowledge they were building this technology to hide illegal grows. And so they said, oh, this is to increase your yield and to increase your quality. And then when Colorado legalized, a bunch of consultants went out there and told them they needed to seal these big warehouses and inject CO2 and all this stuff. And it just started, in my opinion, it's the biggest fluke in cannabis history. But a lot of growers are going to be listening to this and say he's full of shit, because they're all about sealed rooms, but that's just my view of it.
Well, it does seem like the air would get stagnant, right, if you have a sealed room. So exchanging air seems like it makes more sense, just for
Yeah, air is a cleaner, it's basically fresh air is something that is important for a human, it's important for a plant. If you seal your rooms, because that's the key, is you can tell a brilliant engineer, hey, you got to seal the CO2 in this room and build the technology around that. And you've already sent that engineer down the wrong path, even if he's got millions behind him, because once you get sealed that room, you got to fight the humidity from the pots, the heat from the lights, which take massive cooling systems, and it doubles your electric bill. It's crazy when you think about it. It really makes no sense. And in my opinion, the best quality comes from fresh air rooms anyway. But like I said, a lot of growers disagree with that. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, or whatever they say. I'm not hating on anybody else's style. That's just my, personal opinion.
I'd love to hear someone argue with that. I'd love to hear like what's the other. I don't get the other side of that argument.
Their argument is when you push CO2 up to really high levels, that the plant thrives under it and produces more. And but you'll always notice when you talk to a grower, they'll base their production off of how many grams per watt of light. And half of your electric bill is the cooling system and the dehumidifiers. So that formula, like nobody would ever use that formula if they're really trying to calculate. It would be total production for total electricity of the facility, including your cooling systems.
That's a great point there. Okay. I like that. You give me both sides of the argument. I need it.
I've had that argument a million times, so I'm used to that one.
Well, now I'll be bulletproof next time someone tries it on me.
There you go.
It mentioned here somewhere, I think this was from your LinkedIn bio, that your company's technologies have been featured in at least one magazine and a book. Is that something you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, we're lucky enough to meet the owners of Grow Magazine and show them our product, and right away they liked our genetics and wanted to come check out our grow. So I invited the owner of the magazine over, and we did a walkthrough of the grow and the air tunnels, and it looks a lot different than most grows. And so he was like, hey, I want to do a featured article on this. So he did I believe a 12-page article, and this was in late 2018 in Grow Magazine. Damn. And then later we got into Ed Rosenthal's final book, which was cool. There's a lot of different grow styles in the book that they were just covering one of ours because I built octagons to test the air system in an octagon. And anybody in the Northwest knows like that there's these octagon systems were being ran all over the Northwest in the 90s. And it was basically a way to be more efficient with the use of the light, but you need a lot more plants, and medical cannabis is based on plant counts. So they kind of went away after medical, but yeah. Anyway, I could go all day long about that stuff too.
That's fascinating. What was the medical program like out there? Like, what was the plant count?
You could have 6 plants per medical patient, and a caregiver. It was designed for not to have business in California and in Oregon when it passed. It basically was made for, like, say if you have a sick aunt or something that can't grow her own cannabis, you can be made the caregiver and you can grow her 6 plants. And you had a max limit of 3 card holders, so you could only grow 18 plants total. That's if you had 3 medical cards that you were caregiving for, and you couldn't sell to that person. And so that's how medical came about originally. And because of that, in Portland, you had like a different grow in every 4 or 5 houses. Like there was literally different grows. Like every block had its own, someone was growing on that block, and so like when I was a kid, and I hate to say this because you should be 21, you shouldn't be a kid, but when I was a kid, I was out like selling everybody's cannabis from all these grows. And when they had really good stuff, I would pick their brain about, how they set up their system and all that stuff. And basically whenever someone's crop came in, usually none of them were like dealers or nothing, so they'd like give me whatever they had that they weren't using just so they can make a little money to pay their electric bill. And this is right at the beginning of medical cannabis in 98. And 98 to 2001 basically is where people really started doing that. And yeah, so I got to know a lot of really small growers that were doing really good. And the thing that I noticed when I went to Montana, see what they did is they took our medical laws, and the activists lifted those 2 parts where you're limited to 3 cards and that you can't sell to them. So that both those aspects were lifted out of the Montana initiative in 2004. And that made it so someone could have 1,000 cards with 6 plants per card. And so that's why the first LLCs came out of Montana, the first lobbyists. I mean, everything. Like a lot of people give California that credit, but California was just like we were in Oregon, where you could, have them pay for your electric bill or something minor, but you're not actually running a business like what you could do in Montana at that time.
Yeah, that's a lot. And there was a guy out in Hawaii doing that I interviewed with Rusty Tapp out there. What up, Rusty? And he said there was one guy who was just stacking up massive. But in Hawaii, you could have 20 plants, I believe, so you could get 20,000 at one grow.
Yeah, that's definitely how medical really unfolded. Is the bigger the plant, the better. because, you know, if you're limited to 6 plants per card holder, if you can get 2 pounds of plant, you know, throw a lot of light energy on each one with big pots, you know, you really see that style happen in medical at the time. But when you look at the actual underground that was not medical, they were running high volumes of small plants. We called it sea green. But you would cut down on your veg hours. You would just run more plants. So it's just more efficient power wise. But yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about rec is because it's based off canopy in most places, not plant count. So it's more, you know, this is your square footage, whatever you can pull out of that, you know.
Yeah. What are the other license types over there? Like you got the producer license. I assume there's like manufacturing and
yeah, the
like,
processing license, retail license, delivery.
you
Yeah,
got delivery.
it's we only have a production license right now, but we're gonna be, you know, shooting to get a retail right now. We're looking for retails that are for sale.
But a delivery license is a thing that exists in Oregon.
Yeah, I think the way I understand it, you have to have a dispensary to have delivery. I've seen a couple times people have delivery that I didn't know of their dispensary, you know, but I don't know how they did that. From what I understand, you had to have a dispensary license to do it. So we're planning on setting up a dispensary and delivery in two different towns here in Oregon, and yeah, keeping it small but just high end and small where we can, you know, supply our 2 dispensaries.
I think that rule is bullshit. It's like because anyone with a car could fucking run around selling weed, you know, and they've like totally eliminated that.
You know, there was a House Bill 2515 here that it originally, when it was introduced, it was that small farms like ours could do delivery services and have that direct to consumer relationship. And
Yeah.
somebody, you know, I'm not going to say who because I don't know for sure, but somebody lobbied real quick to change that. So now it's still going through the House, but they pulled that aspect of it. And
No.
yeah, so
That's happening right now.
yeah. Right now, it's House Bill 2515, and when you look at the very beginning of that House bill, it would have allowed delivery by small farms. But that's the problem, and why I think we need a small business cannabis organization, because everything that's not in our favor, you'll see. You know, you won't see any support for things that are in our favor, but yet, you know, all these organizations want our money, and to be able to say that we back them, and you know, it's a joke.
So can you tell us? I want to know about the regulatory framework. Could you tell us maybe like if there's any good parts? I seem to be like striking out when I ask people that, but I'd like to know like what are the parts that you think are decent and what's the dog shit?
All right, like I believe, you know, the small farm, like restricting the size of the grow, I think that's a really good thing, because ultimately the smaller the grows, the more licenses that can be issued. So like if you have a whole bunch of grows that are 10,000 square feet of flower canopy, that's not going to supply the whole state. I mean, you could have hundreds and hundreds of those, and they're not going to supply the whole state. So that opens it up. I mean, social equity and all the things that people talk about, you have to have small business licenses to have real social equity, because being, you know, like a 1% owner in a really big corporation, if you even get that, that's not social equity. You know, that's like, hey, let me take a picture with you real quick and put it on all my web pages. And, you know, like reality, like 51% is real social equity, you know.
Well, that's what we have in Vermont, 51%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it should be, because if you don't have 51%, you can't pick your boards. And if you can't pick your boards, you're not in control of your entity. And so I like that style of, you know, a whole bunch of small businesses, people owning their dispensaries in their own neighborhoods. You know, I want to have, you know, some really nice setups out here in Oregon, where when people are in Oregon, they're seeing what we're doing. But when I go to their state, I don't want to own their stuff. I want to go in and check out what they got going on, you know.
Yeah, right.
Keep it local, you know.
Yeah, that's got to be the beauty of it. Like keeping it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are there any other highlights?
Oh yeah. So the small business aspect.
Oh, lost your sound there, buddy. Can't hear you. Oh, there we
Yeah.
go.
So that's what needed to be fixed. Like no corporation, LLC, or individual should be able to own in more than, you know, one license, for example, when it comes to production in a state. And that way you don't have that license stacking, is what I call it. But But the same thing with
Yeah.
dispensaries. I mean, if a state says, hey, no corporation or individual can own in more than 7 dispensaries, I mean, that's not, that's not going to hurt anybody as far as I'm concerned, unless you're like wanting to own the whole market. And so like some of the things are kind of more like, I'd like to see it go that direction, but it's not going to, like
It does seem like there are people out there who are trying to own the whole market.
Yeah, and that's why I think the only way to counter it is like for example, with my tribe in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, we wrote the very first small business license in the country, and each farm is restricted to 500 plants, and you can't own in more than one farm on our reservation. So it makes it so there's a whole bunch of companies down there that are all individually owned, and even our dispensaries. I mean, I guess I wouldn't reduce it down to one dispensary on the state level, but on our tribal level, you can only own in one dispensary. So the way the regs are is you can only own in one of each license type.
So you're Native American as well.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Native and French and Scottish, so I'm mixed up, but
I'll forgive you for the French. Don't worry.
Yeah.
No, my buddy Tom Durfee is up in Canada right now, and he's actually got a couple dispensaries that he's open on something very similar. He's coming on the show soon to talk about that. That's cool.
Nice.
I like that idea though. So let's talk about some of the worst points of the bill. I'm sure there's a bunch, but I'd like to hear like what you think is the real.
On the bill that's introduced right now, some of the stuff isn't too bad. Like it's just the fact that they took out that direct delivery by farms. I would like to know who did that, but somebody moved quick to do that, and they had some flex because it got done fast. But I would just like to see more political action by small businesses, because if we don't start sticking together and defending consumers and stuff like that, we're going to see a big business takeover eventually.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I lost my place there. I had another question, and then I scrolled off it. All right. We're going to get into some funky shit. We'll just jump right in. Or the state agencies. That's what I was going to ask. What are the state agencies that handle the licensing and the regulations out there in Oregon?
In Oregon, it's the OLCC. So it's the Oregon Liquor Cannabis Commission, Liquor and Cannabis Commission.
They wrapped it up with liquor.
Yeah, they wrapped it up with liquor. And so, I mean, if we were managed like microbreweries, I think that would be the best model. If we could get regulations and learn from the microbrewers, that's kind of my focus. Like the Brewers Association has beautiful bylaws, and no cannabis organization yet has bylaws like that restrict and make sure that, for example, to be a member of the Brewers Association, you have to be a small business, and they have very specific aspects that define that. And I don't know where I'm going at with this.
No, that's cool. I've heard a lot of people make this comparison, especially in Vermont, where we have more fucking craft breweries and fucking people, I think.
Oh yeah, with the OLCC, that's right. But
I was just curious.
Had some mix-ups happen where the head of the OLCC was fired by the governor, and then the Secretary of State here in Oregon got in trouble for having a business deal going on with one of the biggest cannabis companies, so she had to resign recently. And so we have a lot of cannabis drama going on.
Can we slow down for a second? You said someone got fired by the governor?
Yeah, the head of the OLCC.
For what?
He was getting very, very expensive liquor bottles, because right now the liquor side of the OLCC is basically they control the entire liquor business even more than they do cannabis. And so he was able to get like really expensive alcohol bottles that I don't know, I think it was like $15,000 or something like that for each bottle, and he was able to pick them up for like $100. And there's just a bunch of things like that. So the governor fired him, and then it came out later that the Secretary of State had a contract with Lamoda, which is I think the second biggest cannabis company in the state. And so they were paying her to go find licenses in other states and things like that. But it directly affected our audit of the OLCC. So she was basically forced to resign, and just a lot of drama going on in the state.
Hold up. Can I show one? I found something. When I was poking around, I Googled Oregon cannabis lab fraud, and here we go. What do we got? We got The power couple of Oregon cannabis bankrolled top Democrats even as their company's taxes and bills went unpaid. You ever heard that
Yep.
one?
Yeah, that was the one that the Secretary of State was forced to resign. They basically collected $7 million in tax revenue, from what I understand, and then didn't pay it to the state. So that's basically stealing from the state, because it's not like they're paying that out of income. That's something the consumer paid. They just collected it. And so they were just keeping the tax revenue, it looks like. And since they had, friends in high places, they were able to continue to get more and more licenses. I believe they have 30 dispensary licenses. So it's interesting. I mean, I don't like to talk specifically about individual companies, but theirs has been a very public argument. So nothing I can say isn't not in the news, So
yeah, once it's in the news, we can say whatever we want.
yeah, I mean, they threatened to sue. Their attorney threatened to sue the reporter Sophie Peel that was writing the articles about LaMotta. And after her first couple articles, they sent her a letter threatening to sue her. And she just started publishing them daily after that. She was just
Fuck
like,
yeah.
she's definitely, I
Where's
wouldn't
she?
want to make her mad.
Can I talk to her? She sounds like my kind of gal.
Yeah, Sophie Peel is her name with Willamette Weekly. And
Yeah.
she basically, because of her reporting, that's what caused the Secretary of State to have to step down. So I mean, she's no joke.
I like to be friends with her.
Yeah, she's cool.
Luke from El Muerta dropped seeds, not bombs. Nice for tuning in, Luke. He's always watching. Thanks, buddy. He was another black market hustler like you.
Used to be retired.
right. Sorry, no, I didn't mean to confuse that one. I do want to. So let's jump into some of this lab stuff, man, because it sounds like. I mean, I know I was tracking this lawsuit in Arkansas, and it sounds like you are. This is why I connected with you. I feel like on LinkedIn was I saw some of your comments regarding this issue and the pesticide usage and stuff like that, and I think you were really like way out in front of anybody else I'm connected with. So first of all, like tell us what's going on with some of these labs and how people how it got exposed really.
Well, I call it THC proliferation, but originally I was writing about testing because the chain of custody is compromised, so there could be pesticides on the shelf. Because as growers, we present whatever we want to the labs, and so we can present a batch. Say it's batch 40 and we know it's clean, but we're getting a test result for batch 42. So we can literally, a sticker determines that. So you can stick anything in front of them, get your test score, and that's if they're not involved. If the lab's involved, which they have to compete for our business. And so that's how THC proliferation basically got started, is whatever lab would give the highest THC scores, everybody start doing business with them. And the labs that gave
I'm losing you a little bit, man.
Yeah, I think it's because my phone's dying. Like, let me run and grab a charger. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, do it, please. I'd like to keep this going. Yeah. Thanks, Luke. Hey, it's good to see you again, man. Everybody that's still watching, hey, Thomasoni's Bistro, Eastburg, Vermont, baby. Call Johnny out, man. He makes the best pizza in Vermont. Can't beat it. Look, I'm going to do another shameless plug. I forgot I could just ad-lib with some shit. Here, you got graphic design needs, you call Roxanne Brawl. High fives and low standards.
Sorry about that, man.
Don't worry about it. I was just doing a couple of shameless plugs for the homies here. I got my fuck metric t-shirt on. Word up to Ron Durbin. Yeah, I'm there. How we doing?
All right. So what were we talking about here? We're talking about how that testing stuff started.
Yeah, you were talking about the lab fraud and sort of how it, what actually, you were talking about THC proliferation or something.
Yeah. So basically, like, whichever labs were willing to give the higher THC scores got all the business. And so honest labs basically were, once you say fail somebody on your pesticides or you give them an 18% THC score, you're not going to hear from that farm again. And so it just created an environment where even honest chemists, have over $1 million into their lab. And if they didn't start doing it, they were going to fail. And so, I feel for them, but they still shouldn't do it, because the cannabis companies are in the same boat. If you don't go lab shop and find the highest scores possible, it's detrimental to the value of your cannabis. And so, like, I got on LinkedIn basically to start complaining about how THC scores determine value, and it's just couldn't be further from the truth. And then that's when the lawsuit started, and some articles by some chemists. And are you there?
I can hear you. Your video. Oh, boom! We lost you. Lost you. Let's see if we can get Trent back in here. Shameless more ads. We got the fuck metric. I thought that was a great interview with Ron Durbin, by the way. Ron was a killer, exposing a lot of the bullshit that's going on down in Oklahoma. Some seriously shady business, shutting down people's businesses over bullshit. Maybe it was a little racist. Let's see if Trent will jump back in now. What else we got? We got a couple good ones coming up for you. John's coming back. By the way, John Tomasoni will be here Tuesday at 11 a.m. We're going to do it early morning. And next Thursday on the 15th, I got Danny Carson. Man, Danny's a guy I met through Mike Crawford and the Young Jerks. What up, Mike? Danny was a former True Lead employee who worked at the facility in Holyoke, Massachusetts, where Lorna McMurray died. Danny's going to come on and talk about workers' rights. They've been doing some protests down there and some union stuff. Good kid. And then, oh boy, I got one more on the schedule. Let's see if it's Pierre Vachon, my man, the Beast. I started doing comedy with Pierre right at the beginning, man. Pierre used to be a professional wrestler. Hell yeah. Pierre's going to come on the show. Trent's trying to get back. If we can't get him, we can cut it there and we'll do a two-parter. I hope we can get him back. We're gonna give him a couple minutes here. We'll do some shameless plugs. I got some more shameless plugs we could do. Like my man up at Forbes Finest here, some of the best herb in Vermont right there. Forbes. Right next to that, we got the highly rooted sticker, which we can't really see that well, but Michelle was nice enough to drop me off a joint earlier. Thanks, Michelle. Well, he's trying, guys. He's trying. Let's see who else we got up here. We got my man Will C on the artwork. Don't be an asshole. Will C, Green Door Studios, Vermont. Matt Lindemer, where you been, buddy? I hope your kids are doing all right. And the wifey, I'm with the genetics, buddy. I see you, man. Thanks for tuning in. What's Matt? I forgot his dispatch name. Lamoille County Therapeutics. And we got my man Tom, the ganja delivery guy, obviously all day. Tom got 3 slaps up here because he's a fucking great guy. I don't know if we're gonna get him back, guys. And I'm running out of shout outs. Cross Cannabis. I don't know if he does that anymore. TikTok. I wish I had a music video we could play. I could do some MTV DJing. Well, I really hope we can get him back in here because let me try a fresh link for him. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Hey. Oh, I saw you for a second there.
Oh, Are you there?
I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I was
Try it again.
cool. I was just about to cut it, and you're perfect timing. All right. I had to do shameless plugs and shout outs awkwardly for a minute.
Yeah, my bad on that.
No, don't worry about it, dude. I'm glad to have you back. Fucking, do you remember where we were at? Oh, somewhere.
I think we were talking about how THC, scores started taking off out of control. Yeah. So I was already concerned about testing since it was obvious that the labs worked for us and compete for our business, but I didn't realize how far it was going to go until I started seeing THC scores at over 50% on flower out here, and it was just getting so ridiculous that I got on LinkedIn. This was a year ago. And I got on LinkedIn because the lab guy was like, "Hey, you should get on LinkedIn, and that's where all the other professionals from the industry are that you can talk about this and find the farms you need to network with." So I got on. I just started saying, "Hey, all this testing stuff is fraud. It's ridiculous." Started saying all of a sudden people were like, "Who the hell is this guy?" I think because I was just saying things that nobody else was saying at the time, really, and then Josh Swider out of California, he wrote an article. This is like 2 weeks after I got on LinkedIn, and he just happened to write an article because he went and tested the shelf with 2 other labs and found all kinds of discrepancies. And so when he took it to the regulators in California, they wouldn't do anything about it. And even he found pesticides up to 5 times the legal limit on the shelf. And when he took it to the state agency, they didn't even take that product off the shelf. And so he got frustrated to the point where he went public, at the very same time I was going public. And that triggered a guy by the name of Alex. Shout out to Alex at Weed Week and down in California. And he messaged me and was like, "Hey, what's going on with this lab fraud you're talking about?" And I told him, if you test the shelf right now, you're going to find all sorts of problems. And so he tested the shelf, but he just tested potency. He didn't test for pesticides or anything. And he found that I believe every single pre-roll that he tested was dramatically different than the test score on the package. And so he did an article on it, which really kind of went viral. And so then I had attorneys and chemists reaching out from all over the country. And so these labs were messaging me saying, "Hey, this is what's going on in my state. My business is failing because I won't give these guys these high test scores they want." And and then so I started, because I kind of have a political background from being a cannabis activist. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start networking in these attorneys with these chemists. And so I started kind of introducing the attorneys to people that can prove what I was saying, and they took it from there. That's how like all the consumer lawsuits in California started. And so like I'm not a part of any of it, but I was just tired of the bull crap, tired of like testing is supposed to be there to protect the consumer, and they're told all the time at these dispensaries that we have real third-party testing, but the labs really are a client of ours, or we're a client of theirs, I guess you could say. It's not a real third-party type relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's clear that there's a financial, like when testing becomes a for-profit industry, it's like the financial incentives for cheating are pretty obvious.
Yeah,
somebody,
and if the labs were actually contracting through the state agencies, you wouldn't have that at all. It would, compliance testing would be real compliance testing if the labs actually worked for the state agencies instead of our companies.
Assuming the state agencies are trustworthy.
Hey, that's a whole nother topic, So I do agree with that. I think the biggest problem with testing is that's technically usually a regulator type job, in my opinion. And since it's all private labs, the only way to solve that is have them contract through the state and make it random. So basically nobody knows what lab's going to be testing for what farm, and that there's no business ties to where that farm can't pull their business from them just because they got a bad score. So there has to be something like that, because until then the competition is just too stiff. I mean, even with the lawsuits happening, there's still rampant THC fraud going on.
And you said a bunch of different states, labs from different states reached out to you. Like, could you name a bunch of the state? Do you care to?
Can I what now? I couldn't hear you.
Can you name the states? You said a bunch of these labs in different states reached out to you. How many different states, and like which ones are they?
Oh man, all over the country, from California, here in Oregon, Washington, Colorado, New York. The New York lab that was getting involved in the regulations actually is the one that told me to get on LinkedIn, because I was trying to help them kind of fix these loopholes and make it where the labs aren't having to compete for the business of cannabis companies in New York. Because what I was hoping is if one state would get it right, I could take those regulations and introduce them here in Oregon. So like my personal goal when I was exposing testing fraud was not, I didn't really think of the lawsuit aspect. I was thinking, hey, if some regulators see how serious this is to consumers, that one of them would, have their attorneys write something that would fix it. I guess I was kind of naive because I thought like regulators would be very concerned with consumer health, and knowing how this stuff works, I just kind of had this weird image of it that regulators would actually try to fix it. And so that's my main reason for going public. And actually, the first article I wrote in 2015 was for the same reason. I was trying to get medical testing in cannabis in Montana, and there was a new medical initiative called I-182, and I was trying to get the cannabis organizations to put testing in it, and they wouldn't do it. So I wrote that public article to kind of pressure them to do it, and that's kind of the same reason why I went public. I'm not someone that likes to be in front of a camera, obviously, you can tell, but I was just tired of how this was going.
Let's see. Oh, hey, I do know. We got Tess Adam here. Hey, Tess. Hey, Dr. Tess. New York used to only have one state-run lab, Wadsworth, and I believe, Tess, that's the same situation here in Vermont. At least they had the Vail lab, the Vermont Agriculture and Environmental Labs or something. That's like the state's reference lab. But also, when our adult use market opened, we only had one fully functioning lab for everybody. So, and we still only have two. It's wild.
Yeah, that's better. Having one is better than having multiple, because then the cannabis company can't fire them if they don't give them the scores they want. But even too, like some of the states, that I don't really want to say them out loud because then people will know exactly what lab I'm talking about. But in some of the states, for example, on the East Coast, there's one I'm talking to that has only 2 labs in the entire state. And one of them will bend the rules all sorts of ways just to get the business. And the other one has, $1 million worth of equipment that she bought, and it's just sitting there because nobody wants her going in and saying, hey, this is violating code because you're allowing me to test it before it's packaged, for example, all sorts of different things like that. So the biggest problem is if you're a fraudster in cannabis, you're on top, because whoever has the highest scores wins. Whatever lab gives the highest scores wins, and anybody that's honest is losing their ass. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, though.
That is how business seems to go. I want to get this other comment from Tess in here. She said they'd only take 2 lots a week if they had time, and you had to proactively submit for testing 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time. And certainly saw some bottlenecking here in the lab testing at first. We had people waiting up to 2 months to get results back, which is wild. I can't imagine, like, you've done all the work, you've got your flower cut, you got it all nicely trimmed up, you go to or whatever, and then you got to let it sit at a lab for fucking 2 months. Like, come on.
I'm getting bad signal again. Sorry, that was breaking up, but
well, the turnaround times Tess was talking about, it's just it's got to be frustrating as a business owner when you can't get your product out.
Oh, I agree, but the turnaround times, I think, is secondary to the actual test scores, because if a lab, say, is going to give you a 35% and the other lab is going to give you a 25%, you'll wait a month for that test score to get that 35, because you're literally talking the difference between 2,000 a pound and 1,000 a pound on that. If whatever lab gives you that high test score is going to literally double your value of your cannabis. And then if, for example, say you're worried about mold and worried about other issues, well, whichever lab is going to look the other direction and let you hand them the sample instead of picking it themselves, or, there's various ways to get through and pass testing. Sometimes, in my opinion, it's not even tested and they just give them a pass,
Yeah, so, sure. And that's also weird, the chain of custody, like you said, and the very beginning part where the growers get to select their own samples. And it's like, look, I trust the guys I know that grow weed, but that clearly sets up a situation where you could cherry pick, or, you said batch testing. You said it's like OJ controlling the blood samples.
Yeah, I mean, not to pick on OJ, but if you look at it, that was actually a crime lab chemist that told me that, because I was talking to him about how we control like what batch they're going to test from. We call them and set up the appointment so we know when they're coming. And then basically we can present anything because a simple sticker is all that determines what that batch is. So the lab never knows what they're actually testing. They have no idea. I could be showing them the same product out of the freezer over and over again, and then my actual harvest, not test it, but send it to the store because I know it's not going to be tested at the store. So the way it goes, I can present them anything, get my score, it gets emailed back to me, and in the tracking software, now that batch has a test score. So you can't trust a COA at all. If you're a dispensary owner and you're buying product, you got to trust that farm, because that COA can be easily totally fraudulent.
And it's what about what the fuck was I going to ask you? Some of this remediated weed, is that a topic you'd care to dive into a little bit?
Oh yeah, Tess and I talk about that all the time, actually. So,
Cool.
You know, with the remediation issue, in my opinion, I don't want to smoke remediated weed that's been, you know, ozoned or whatever the hell they're doing, you know, radiated. Yeah, in my opinion, like if you're growing bud right and you have the right control of your environment, you will never have a mold issue. If you have good genetics, if you're running proper temperature algorithms, if you're using high volumes of fresh air, you're not ever going to have a problem. And the fact that these companies are having problems is they have to remediate their product. So they want to make it, so in my opinion, they want to make test scores to where it is so strict on microbes that you're going to have to remediate all the product. Like here in Oregon, it's set where there's no like allowable levels. If you even just get a trace of spores, for example, it'll pop dirty on aspergillus. So there's a whole bunch of outdoor farms that aren't even planting this year because the cost to remediate it is more than the value of the cannabis.
Wow. That's boy, that's a great point there again, man. And I have heard that there's some states that have loosened up some of their standards because they realized that they were too stringent at first. I think everyone wanted to just crack down. They're like, oh, this is bad and this is bad. But really, like, no, there's not enough scientists sitting in the seats where they write these rules and shit.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And at the end of the day, like I'm absolutely against moldy weed. I mean, if you're not able to pass the proper test, like Tess and I were actually talking about this, like what would be considered, you know, an accurate test that's like, okay, this is not safe to consume. And that absolutely has to be happening, and there needs to be, you know, really good controls of the environment. But at the end of the day, if you're too strict on mold where you can't even have a single spore, like if there's a dead spore on it and it fails immediately, the counter to that is fungicides and pesticides. And because to prevent a failed test, you're going to have people spraying their flowering plants constantly. And so what's the risk of that? Like me personally, I'd rather smoke a spore or two, you know, not something that's got mold all over it, but I'd rather have a spore or two like on my bud than have a fungicide that I'm smoking, because I can guarantee you, man, that stuff is not good for you, you know. But again, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but most of these sprays need to be tested for the dangers of combusting them and inhaling them. And so it's a give and take. Like you got to make sure the mold isn't there. But at the same time, if you go too crazy on it, you're going to cause an epidemic of pesticide use.
Yeah, and I'm with you, man. I'm sure I've smoked a couple of mold spores in my life. I'd rather that than the Eagle 20 or whatever that turns into fucking cyanide.
Yeah. And the one thing that worries me is a lot of the people that are pushing this really strict mold testing, you bring up these fungicide issues and they won't even talk about that issue. They'll literally be like, oh, well, if they're using fungicides, it'll fail on that aspect of the test. But it's like, honestly, it's ignorant because there's so many things that we can spray that are not even tested for. So it's not going to fail you. I mean, you can spray neem oil every single day, which is mixed with dish soap. And you could literally spray that on your flowering plants every day and pass your testing perfectly, and have a perfectly clean COA. And so that's the problem is like to me, if you really care about consumer safety, you're going to be talking about both. You're going to say, okay, fungicides are a risk, and these spores are a risk. How do we balance this?
Yes, boy, and I never I talked to a couple of the remediation companies out in Vegas when I was out there for MJ BizCon, and it was interesting because none of them were talking about, hey, maybe you should go see the guys who are selling better ventilation down the hall. They're like, nah, just buy this shit. It'll fix all your problems. It's like a magic bullet, right?
Yeah. And honestly, some of those systems are like 400 grand just for a single machine. So to a very big entity, without naming names, but to a very big entity, you look at it from that point of view. Hey, I can buy this $400,000 machine, and then next thing you know, I have the requirements so strict that even these clean organic growers can't pass testing. But my machine, like for example, there's no way, even if I wanted to remediate, I would not spend $400,000 on a remediation machine. I'm a little farm. It would put me out of business, and granted, luckily, we've passed our test since the strict testing came up. And so my concern, I really believe our systems can pass testing no problem. So I'm not worried about it. I'm more worried about the other farms that can't pass it because they are going to start spraying. It's either that or go out of business.
And is there do you guys have a track and trace program out there, like a Metric or a fucking BioTrack?
Yeah, we have Metric.
Metric. Hey, Metric. It's good. Any thoughts on Metric?
I think that it would work a lot better if we were able to add a couple new algorithms onto the testing aspects of it. This is the thing, is like Metric, it can be frustrating in certain aspects, but for me, the most important thing is someone needs to get in there and adjust the software to where it randomly chooses the labs and who they're going to test and whose product. And if someone would do that, even if they just built a software program that would tie into Metric and fix testing, I think that if you're a software engineer and you're listening to this, to me, that's golden, because nobody's done it yet. But if you, for example, had it where, okay, so if I started selling a harvest to dispensaries, Metric knows, because the way Metric's set up, it knows when a harvest is going from there to the dispensaries. And so you could have a software program that as soon as that product starts hitting dispensary shelves, it randomly chooses which dispensary you're going to test that batch at and which lab's going to do it. And so that makes me as a grower know that when I send this product to the store, it is going to get a test, and I don't know which store it's going to be at, but it is going to get a test by a real third party. And cannabis companies will still test with labs to make sure they'll pass that test, but you're actually making compliance testing work at that point. And the compliance labs actually will get more contracts when they're finding things instead of less. And then you'll also get accurate THC scores, because I'm not going to give you a 40% if I know it's going to be tested at the store. Even the cannabis company doesn't want to do that, because say the guy tested at the store and it's a 25%, already you got public information that you had to recall your packaging or whatever,
And I think he said something about that somehow like trade secrets were being used to like say, oh, we don't have to expose our testing methods to you or something like that.
Yeah, that's in Michigan. Actually, there was a lab that got in trouble for having too high a THC scores, from what I understand. And they were telling the state that it was trade secret methods because there's no standardized testing methods. So they were using that. And, I really I don't like to say names of companies because, it's just not a legally good thing to do, because this is a really heated situation. There's a lot of big entities getting in trouble.
I think I could guess, but we'll guess later.
Yeah, but basically, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff without having standardized testing, where I have chemists complain about that all the time, that they're basically approving everybody, and someone could say, hey, I have a method that makes it so I can calculate THC better, and that's why I get an extra 6 points out of it, is because I'm reading all the THC or whatever,
Can't tell you what we're doing, but I promise you, we've reinvented HPLC.
Yeah, and my clients love it.
It's been the same for a long time, but we figured it out. Did we hit this class action lawsuit in California? That was on my list.
There's like 7 of them right now.
Yeah, is that also related? I think you
Yeah,
mentioned that earlier.
they're all from the same attorney groups down there, and they were watching what was going on with the Weed Week article and everything, and then and they went and started testing shells themselves and started filing suits for different consumers. But those are consumer class actions, I think, all of them, and all on different entities.
Okay. There was a couple. I'm running out of shit here. I'm not out yet, but there's a couple more I wanted. I wanted to ask you, as like a black market guy coming into the legal market. I know we talked a little bit about this on the phone, but like, you feel like, I mean, obviously, there's no taxes when you're selling on the black market. How is it going? Do you feel good about that decision? And do you have any like friends that are still black market guys? And how are they doing?
Okay, so you're talking about how do I feel about the taxes?
Well, I mean, the taxes is fine, but
I'd
it's
rather pay taxes than risk jail. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Like for me, I went fully legal by the book because for two reasons. For one, I got kids, and so I can't roll the dice like when I was younger. And so to me, going legal was the only way to go. And the other thing is, how do I put it? Eventually it's all going to be legal, and so if you don't build your brand now and get out of the black market, and so my advice to anybody in the black market is get yourself a license. If they don't allow small business licenses in your state, get active as an activist. But another reason why I'm completely out of the black market is because I'm an activist. It's not safe for me or my friends. You mentioned my friends that are in the black market. I mean, most of them still are probably, but I couldn't tell you because I purposely won't call them because of my phone. Like if I bring attention to them, that wouldn't be good because I bring too much attention to myself to be in contact with them. Put it that way. But most of my friends were really small growers that directly supplied their area. Like you never saw really big grows back then like you do now. Like a lot of these cartels growing in California and Southern Oregon, they're having thousands of plants and greenhouses, and that was not even a part of the black market when I was young and actually involved. It was all very little grows, and that's why the quality was a lot better too. We've seen the quality dive on the black market and the legal market because of the massive grows now, that didn't exist back then.
Interesting point. That's not what I was expecting. Huh. You got me there, Trent. I interviewed one of my friends who's still a black market guy. We did like a drugs Inc. episode. He wore like a luchador mask and fucking voice modulator. I was just curious. I'm like, he said he was excited for legalization. He said, yeah, because of the taxes, that's gonna, weed will be going out the door for such a price that I'll be able to like bump my prices up a little bit. And
well, and without taxes, man, like it would have never passed. Most of these initiatives would have never passed without taxes because people are like, hey, tax them and legalize it. But until Colorado legalized and there was taxes, medical was moving very slow, state by state crawling. And then when Colorado legalized and they started collecting tax revenue, virtually 95% of initiatives passed after that because everybody was looking at Colorado and they're like, yeah, I want some tax revenue too. I want some new schools. And so for me, I don't complain about the taxes at all because at the end of the day, you can produce more product too because most black market growers are growing in their basement, man. I mean, most of them have 30 plants, and so I don't look at those guys as a threat. I look at them like small brewers, that are brewing in their garage. And like my dad was a fireman and he drank beer with his buddies, that he brewed, and he was never really a drinker. But when his brews came in, they would all come sit around and drink, and all the firemen would be like, your last batch was a little better because you put this spice in it, or whatever. And he would be always making adjustments. And you see that a lot with cannabis home grows. You start having crops in, your friends come over to hang out and smoke some weed with you, and you guys talk about that versus the last batch. That was kind of the culture I grew up in. Like I didn't grow up where people were like the Godfather and shit, and having mansions. Like everybody had little grows and just had enough to pay their rent, and small timers, and
Yeah, that's good enough. I wish I had that right now. Shit.
and at the end of the day, man, that's what I'd like to see for the small business model, is that all that small time grows is what was boosting quality. And I really believe that the states that allow a whole bunch of small businesses, there's not a big entity that can compete with that model, in my personal opinion.
For sure, not on quality. I haven't seen anything quality coming out of these MSOs. I mean, it's
Yeah, and at
decent,
the end
but
of the
nothing.
day, they have this funny thing where they think that cheap beer. Some people like cheap beer because they don't have to make much money, and then some people will buy expensive beer. That's not how it works with weed, man. Because
Yeah.
I grew up in my reservation's the poorest community in the country, and if you got some dank bud there, they're gonna pay 7, 8 times as much for it, and they won't even want it. If you present the shit weed to them versus some fire, they're gonna pay for that fire every time. Because I'd rather take a bong hit of some really dank weed than 5 bong hits of trash. And so like even in poor neighborhoods, man, everybody wants good bud and are willing to pay for it. So that's the one difference between cannabis and beer. It's
I've drank lots of PBRs, but I'm not smoking any fucking swag.
Yeah, exactly, bro. Exactly. And all my friends, bro, like they would have all paid $20 for a gram of fire, then $20 for an eighth of Bammer any day of the week. And they just didn't understand the consumer base when they built these companies. They were like, oh, we'll kick out a bunch of cheap weed by the gram and then we'll take over. It's like it was a terrible miscalculation.
It's kind of fun though to watch them flounder.
Yeah,
I'm not mad about it. And watching these investors on like Twitter yelling about it, they're so bad. It's like, yeah, what did you think you were investing in?
And the funny thing too, man, is they always talk about the black markets kicking their ass because of taxes. The black market's kicking their ass because most of them are small grows, and so like their neighbors are all buying from them because they got danker weed than the store does. And so like it's just like in the old days, we'd bring weed to parties and shit, and we'd have purple sticky bud, and anybody that had whack bud, they'd be like, hey, what's your number? You know what I mean? Like, and that's it's the same thing today. Nothing's changed with the date. Like you can buy some weed and be like, this is 40%. And then you're going to go into a place where people got some dank weed and you're going to smoke that and say, oh, screw this test score, and they can't figure out what's wrong. But in reality, the underground's kicking their ass on quality.
That's good. I'm glad. I hope that bothers them.
Yeah.
There's one more thing on my list I want to ask you about, and it just says ArcView. Is that something we can talk about?
I don't really have an opinion, I guess you could say, on ArcView. Like, what about ArcView exactly do you want to talk about?
I wasn't sure. Most of my notes, I'm like, this one's a green light, this one's a green. I was just curious, like it. It's some investment vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I've never worked with them or anything, but a lot of labs have gotten their investment that way, and a lot of cannabis companies. So it's been good for a lot of people, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about them, but yeah, I guess they were one of the big capital raisers.
This is a Steve D'Angelo project?
What was that? I couldn't hear you.
This is Steve D'Angelo started this ArcView?
From what I understand, yeah, he started that, and I think he started a lab too. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, and he's got a bunch of businesses out there, right? He's got dispensaries and shit, and grows.
Yeah, he used to be an owner in Harborside. I don't know how much of it he owned, but yeah, he was an owner in Harborside also.
Yeah, and I see his son on LinkedIn.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I can't remember his name right offhand, but yeah. Let's see. I think that's the end of my shit here, Trent. I think we got most of it. I want to definitely these couple of names you threw at me, that whoever wrote those stories, I'd like to definitely get a hold of her. That sounded cool.
Yeah. Sophie Pill, she's killing it. And
Sophie Pill.
And I think that's a lot of the issues that she's uncovering is happening in other states. That it'd be nice if journalists in other states would be paying attention to the things that she's paying attention to. Because a lot of these big entities are able to really easily lobby at the state legislature level, and so they're always rubbing shoulders with our elected officials. while we're out here just kind of complaining about what's happening. And I think small businesses need to start talking to their elected representatives, find out what the organizations are pushing in their state, and don't just be happy to be associated to somebody. That would be my advice to most small businesses, because some of them will be like, they'll go pay a membership for an organization and be like, I'm part of such and such, and they don't realize that those guys are also taking money from a lot wealthier growers than you, and ultimately are representing their best interests. So it can work against you.
I did have one more quote from you. You said, if we don't win this argument, I'm going to end up working for chump change for these guys.
Yeah.
Let's close on that.
Well, I think when you look at how much most growers are getting paid in the grow, they don't look at the importance of a grower. Even though, like, if it was a brewery, your brewer is probably your most important person, because you got to have your consumer drink that beer and be like, damn, that's good beer, and there's really kind of I hate to say it, but they look down on growers that have been in this their whole life, like me being a cannabis felon. You tell that to an investor and they're going to say, oh, I'd rather invest in somebody else. And they'll go invest in, some guy that grew tomatoes or something his whole life. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes some of these big entities made is, A, they didn't pay anybody worth enough to make it worth it to them. And B, they didn't give equity to people that have fought for this their whole life. And so, like, for me, like, our small business, we're tiny, we're barely moving, in this market, but I'd rather be independent and not have very much money compared to somebody that's just working every day for what, $16-17 an hour or whatever they're going to pay. Like, and that's one of the things with cannabis is easy to screw up. So you do not want people touching your bud that don't have a lot of experience in the process. And so, like, their idea was just basically give a whole bunch of people like labor wages, like you would be working in a field, picking vegetables or whatever the hell, and not realizing the importance of skilled growers from top to bottom.
The McDonald's over here pays more than some bud tenders are making in other states. Is like some of the way, and cultivation too. Yeah, I've heard cultivators talking about $16 an hour, like $16 an hour. Get the fuck out of here.
And that's why the best growers are still in the black market, man. Like, there's growers that are way better than I am that have been in the black market their whole life, their families, or you're talking 5-6 generations of cannabis growers, and so they don't know anything about legit business, but they've made so much money in their lifetime. They're not going to switch over for a $17 an hour job, because that's how they're going to be treated by the big entities. They rather just beat them on the street level. And, so I'm wanting to go legit, build my own brand and do my own thing. But they're right now still the only ones making money, because they're in a position where they don't have to raise millions of dollars just to be able to talk to a customer. That's where I'm at right now. I got to raise $1 million before I can even have a relationship with consumers again. In the black market, it's not like that. You just show somebody some dank weed and they're like, oh shit. And then next thing you know, they're your customer, And, so sometimes I'm kind of jealous of the people that are still in that game. I've been legit fully since 2006, but at the end of the day, man, I want to build a brand and I want to still be here. Whenever these big entities figure it out how to grow right, you better have a license already, because they got the money behind them to take over the whole market. So, guess that's kind of, I don't know what else to say about that.
Word up. Trent Hancock, Creswell Organics. I'm out of shit. If we missed anything, or if you got any shameless plugs or shout outs you want to do, now is the time. But I want to say thank you for joining me. Sorry we had some technical difficulties, but this was a fascinating discussion, and thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, yeah, no, thanks. And I guess I would just say shout out to all the small businesses and keep your equity, and let's win that way. So take it easy, man.
Signing off. Caleb Teskey, your host. Remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print.